The Inside Sleeve with Robbie Buck.
If you were to find yourself sitting down for a chat with Rufus Wainwright, you probably couldn't find a better spot than sitting down in front of a lovely, glistening grand piano, which is exactly where we find ourselves. Hello, Rufus.
Hi, how are you?
Do you have one of these in your house?
Well, I have, I don't have one this big. Ironically, though, I didn't play the piano today, which is funny.
We heard,
Yes.
There's been behind the scenes, there's been a lot of rushing about to make sure that we have a grand piano for you.
Yes, and then I just, it's just a prop, really. It just looks good. That's the only reason.
Is this, I mean, you've done a whole opera on divas.
Yes.
Is this a little bit of diva behaviour?
No, I think it's just, usually I do play the piano, but last night, I gave so much of my diva-ness to the Sydney Opera House that I was somewhat limited in my repertoire this morning.
Let's talk about that, because last night, if you were in that audience, then the lights went down to reveal pretty much a totally dark stage with just a dozen or so candles, and then the audience didn't realise it, but you and the band had walked on stage in that darkness. And instead of the lights coming up, which is what you normally expect, there's just a voice that begins. Yeah. And that voice is yours, obviously, and it begins with a song called Candles. Now, that song is a very touching piece of music, but it also, I take it, is extraordinarily personal for you.
Yes. Yeah, no, Candles is the song that I wrote after my mother died. I mean, it was the immediate reaction and shock to that whole situation, and it's also based on a true story where during her illness, I would periodically light candles in all sorts of churches and synagogues and mosques, wherever you could.
You're not a particularly religious man, but you like the space.
No, I'm actually not even baptized anything particular. But I am spiritual, and I tend to fall for all sorts of stuff. But I'd lit all these candles, which I think in the end actually helped the situation. I strongly believe in positive spirits and so forth. So, sadly it didn't fix the situation, and my mother ended up passing away from a rare form of cancer called sarcoma. And right after she died, a couple of days later, I went to a church to continue the ritual, and the church had run out of candles. And then I went to another church, and that church had run out of candles. And I went to 3 separate churches, and they had all mysteriously had no candles. And I really took that as a message, from my mom saying, it's okay, I'm fine, you don't have to send me off. I'm focus on your life, and so it's a true story. I try to do all that I can, but the churches have run out of candles. I try to give you all I own, but the bankers have run out of loaners. It's always just that little bit more that doesn't get you what you're looking for. I tried to block the cabin door, but the churches have run out of candles. I tried to lend a helping hand, but the rooms have all run out of pamphlets. I tried to cook it up and then the kitchen is run out of canned bits. It's always just that little bit more that doesn't get you what you're looking for. I try to bang it on the cabin floor, but the churches have run out of candles. Then one day in the cathedral, I finally lit you a candle, and all along the vaulted halls, the virgins did smile from their mantles. It's always just that little bit more that doesn't get you what you're looking for, but gets you where you need to go. But the churches have run out of candles.
Can I talk to you about writing songs which are deeply emotional? I mean, and that's a perfect example of it, of how you find your way musically in that kind of context, because you're needing to obviously write music that has a life of its own, and in its own ways it has its own weight. And if you're writing from, well, a point of grief, for example, is it a difficult place in which to find a form for a song?
I've done it for so many years now. Because I started really young. I mean, I started at 13 professionally. That was when my first song was released, and of course, I sang even before that with both my parents. That I just don't think about it too much at this point, and songwriting has become a kind of extension of my life in general. I don't really have boundaries between reality and song. You know, I have, there's no difference between the guy who walks on stage and the guy who's backstage. So in a strange way, I'm fueled by life's experiences and life's traumas and joys and so forth. So it's just who I am. I mean, sometimes, you know, I wish I could be a little more manipulative and kind of strategic about what I'm trying to do with my image or how do I want to portray my feelings, because we definitely live in an era where that comes in handy. You know, the most famous people right now are just for personas, really. I mean, they're not real people. Lady Gaga isn't a real person. I mean, that what she's created, you know, it can be a bit of a tough road sometimes, but it's just what comes naturally.
Does that mean it's a very taxing journey for you as a songwriter, the fact that you can't demarcate your...
Well, I would find it far more taxing, I think, to try to, you know, create a kind of smoke screen and not be totally honest. I'm a terrible liar. I'm a bad poker player. Don't ever or play poker with me, because you'll win. So it's just I think it would be more exhausting the other way around for me.
As a songwriter, you've had some fairly turbulent periods in your life to draw from, and really the full gamut. Obviously, the grief of your mother, but there's also been addiction in the past, and more recently, there's been the joy of birth, of fatherhood.
Yes.
I wonder if, when you look back on those different periods in your life, if it changes. Obviously, it changes the mood of your songwriting in some way, but does it change the fundamental spirit of what's in there in a song for you?
Yes, I think one has to understand that initially, my great love is opera. Though I wasn't brought up that way. I came to opera when I was 14 years old. It sort of overtook my artistic existence, and I'm still in the throes of it. I wrote an opera called Prima Donna, and I'm writing another one. So I'm very much attuned to the big experiences, and I love drama, and I love, tragedy and murder. And I don't plan on having any murders committed in my life
probably
for songwriting, but if that happened, I'll probably write a song about it.
Talking about Prima Donna, though, we've just spoken about how much you write from your own experience.
Yeah.
When you're writing an opera, then you are really more removed, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're creating a character.
That in itself is a different.
And so, what is that experience like for you?
Well, it's up one more notch, believe it or not.
Emotionally,
from writing about your own pain, because what ends up happening is that you kind of transfer a lot of your innermost feelings to these kind of foreign characters, these people who you're giving birth to in your imagination, and oddly enough, what I have found, especially since I wrote the opera Prima Donna while my mother was dying, essentially, is that a lot of those hidden pains and traumatic kind of shock issues end up going into that music, things that you aren't even aware that you're going through.
She got to see it with you, though.
Yeah, she got to see the opera. She got to see it, and then she died not long after. So it's because you're writing for an orchestra and opera singers who really have these incredible ranges. You can just let it all out, and when you also look at the great works from history, whether it's Wagner or Verdi or Strauss, there's a pretty high bar there that you can get lost in. So it's even more.
I'm sitting next to a very large grand piano.
Yes.
With Rufus Wainwright. At this stage, he's refusing to touch any of the ivories or the ebony keys, but we'll see how we go. On a slightly different end of the musical spectrum, your most recent album is really a homage, texture-wise, to a lot of the 70s rock and roll, which is a fairly different aesthetic.
Yeah.
What is it about that period, and particularly that sound, that has been so attractive to you?
Well, oddly enough, not oddly enough. Why do I think it's odd that I'm born in the 70s?
Delightfully enough.
Yeah, delightfully enough. Yes, it's. I'm from the 70s, and I, though I don't have too many, memories from that period, I do have a couple, and I was born in 1973, and I have a strong belief that that was the first music that I heard. That was what I was presented with at the beginning of my life. So as the same with Mark Ronson, who's a little younger than I am. So I think in a lot of ways because he's really the one who steered that idea and wanted that to happen. Mark, both of us were we own it. And it does kind of make sense in a kind of biological way, and so that's sort of like the spiritual side. But on the other hand, the 70s was also a great period for songwriting, and unusual songwriting. There's a lot of artists from that period, whether it's like Laura Nyro or my father, Loudon Wainwright, or tons of people who really. You could never quite peg them, They had different feet in different areas, and so you had to be kind of a millipede of an artist back in those days. So it's fun to kind of go back to there.
Your songs, though, strike me as delightfully deceptive at times. In that, from the wide-angle view, when you first hear them almost from a distance, they appear simple in their nature, and the closer you get to them, the more you zoom in on them, you realise they're actually quite complex.
Yeah. I mean, I try to write more simple songs sometimes, but yeah, I'm not naturally drawn to that idea.
If you're writing though for a public, I mean, is there a temptation to try and simplify it?
What I find is that there are certain songs which come in about 5 minutes. And they can be either simple or complicated. Most likely they'll be pretty simple.
Would they come would you be sitting down at a piano like this, for example?
Yes, probably. Yeah.
And would it just well up in you? Would you literally put your fingers on the keyboard and start playing?
Oh, it happens all kinds of ways. I actually, honestly, a lot of times I'm not at the piano. A lot of times I'll be walking, or in the middle of the night. Often, actually, I'll kind of not often, but I have been known to kind of wake up and be tantalized by an idea, and so then I'll work on it. But it doesn't always. I can't like sit down and say now I'm going to write a song often. But I can do that as well. I can do anything.
Well, thank you so much for your time today,
Thank you.
Rufus.
Suckers, does your mama know what you're doing? Look at you, look at you, look at you, look at you, suckers. Does your mama know
RN, your world unfolding.
what you're doing?